What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So last offseason was a fun one. There was a couple big time trades, and I thought it'd be a fun idea to now, 1 year later, given the context of these players that were traded, what happened in the year of the season since they have gotten traded, to give an updated grade on how those trades went down. So that's what we're going to do today. We got trades like Carlson, Alexander DeBrincat, Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be an interesting one to look back on. So without further ado, we're going to dive into it. I'm going to be updating my grades on all the big trades for the 2023 offseason. And we're going to start off with the Erik Karlsson trade. When looking at this trade, there's three teams involved: the Penguins, the Sharks, and the Canadiens. For the Penguins, it's a very interesting trade because I think when solely looking at this trade, I think it's actually pretty fair. Erik Karlsson, although maybe didn't knock it out of the park this season, still is kind of a number one defenseman in my opinion. I think he's going to bounce back in a big way this season. So when looking at this, I think in terms of value, I'm going to give the Penguins like a B+ because they did dump some bad deals, or what we thought was a bad deal, Mikael Granlund, especially at the time, and they got somewhat of a number one defenseman. The only problem is this team probably shouldn't have went so aggressive when looking at how they yet again missed the playoffs last year. They're really, and now this offseason, they're like dumping, they're taking on contracts for assets. They're kind of like fully entering a rebuild. So I'm going to go with the B+ for the Penguins. It's a fine deal. It's a fine deal for them. Now, when looking at it for the San Jose Sharks, I think they get an A, considering the fact that first round pick that they got from the Penguins, we thought was going to be, hopefully for the Penguins' sake, like 18th to 25th overall. It ended up being 14th overall, and they used that selection on top of another second round pick to move up and get a very good prospect in Sam Dickinson. And when looking at Mikael Granlund, the guy that was kind of viewed as a cap dump, Pittsburgh was like, take him away from us. He had 60 points in 69 games this season. They could, I'm not sure, I don't think they actually have a retention slot, but they might be able to somehow find a way, maybe through a third party, to dump him at this year's deadline for even more assets. Now, when looking lastly at the Canadiens, they get an A-. When looking at it, they took on Petrie and DeSmith's contract. They got a second-round pick. They ended up flipping those guys as well. Very good move by Kent Hughes to use his available cap space in order to pick up some more assets. So Penguins get a B+. I'm actually going to give the Canadiens an A. The Canadiens get an A, and the San Jose Sharks also get an A. Next up, we got the Alex DeBrincat trade, and this one was DeBrincat for Dominic Kubalik, Donovan Sebrango, and a 2024 first-round pick, whichever one was the worst between the Red Wings and the Boston Bruins. So obviously, it turned into the Boston Bruins that they got from the Tyler Bertuzzi trade. In this one, we'll start with the Red Wings because the Senators one is a little bit complicated. For the Red Wings, I'm going to go with an A-. DeBrincat had an amazing start in Detroit. He had like 9 goals in his first 8 games. He did cool down, but still 27 goals, 40 assists, 67 points. I think he's going to be around the 70, 75 point guy for the next couple of years. And considering he's only making $7.8 million, it was very good by Steve Yzerman to use kind of the leverage that he had. Alex DeBrincat was a local kid, clearly wanted to go to Detroit, and kind of got him at a little bit of a discount. In that Boston Bruins first round pick ended up being like 25th overall, and they were fine in terms of prospects and picks. They didn't need any more. They already have one of the strongest prospect pools in the NHL. So very good by Steve Yzerman. Now the Senators, before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, this was genuinely like a D+. Yes, they got a first round pick, but Kubalik stunk it up for them. He had 15 points in 74 games this year. Donovan Sebrango probably not going to turn into anything. So when looking at it, all they had was that first round pick. What did Steve Staios do with that first round pick? He traded it to the Boston Bruins in order to get Linus Ullmark. So now they basically swapped DeBrincat for Ullmark. I know it's kind of tough to do this, but this is why we're doing it a year later, to see what the full trade trees of these eventually turned into. So as a result, I think you got to go with like an A- for the Senators as well, considering the fact that they had such a deficiency. Well, like in terms of the 2023-2024 season, absolute disaster for the Senators in terms of this deal. But going forward, I think Ullmark, it's still an if, considering he's a pending UFA this season, but if he's eventually the long-term fix for the Ottawa Senators, I think this is very good. Again, even if Ullmark turns out to be fantastic, there's no telling whether the Detroit Red Wings would have eventually traded that first round pick in order to get Ullmark. So for them, Red Wings are basically like set at an A-. The Senators, though, we're gonna have to check in a couple years from now. But right now, considering the fact of what we know about Linus Ullmark the last couple of seasons, I think he's going to be very good for the Senators this year. And as a result, I'm going to go with an A-, considering they didn't have a lot of leverage for DeBrincat, considering the fact that it eventually did turn into Linus Ullmark. It's looking like an actual positive for the Senators. Riley Smith in that offseason was traded from the Vegas Golden Knights to the Pittsburgh Penguins for a 2024 third-round pick. Pittsburgh yet again in this. I'm going to give Pittsburgh a B in this deal. Riley Smith was perfectly meh for them during the regular season. He had 40 points in 76 games, but they were able to flip him to the New York Rangers for a second-round pick. So basically, they ate his $5 million cap hit to upgrade from a third-round pick to a second-round pick. And if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, yeah, it was good to move off him, and you got a third-round pick. So I'm going to give the Vegas Golden Knights an A- in this deal. It was good asset management and recognizing that he's not a core piece. Let's just get him off him now, considering he's decently expensive at $5 million and is an aging winger. Next up, Ross Colton got traded from the Tampa Bay Lightning to the Colorado Avalanche for a second-round pick. I'm going to give the Avalanche a B in this deal. Ross Colton really isn't anything special, but he's only making $4 million for a couple of years going forward. He's 27 years old. He put up 40 points. Second-round pick, 37th overall. To get a solid roster player, a middle six forward, it's a fair deal. It's about fair market value for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're going to get a B as well. When the fact that they couldn't even sign Ross Colton because they were kind of like up against the cap. So initially I would have given this like an A-, maybe even an A. But the guy that they did take, Ethan Gauthier, wasn't that impressive this year in the QMJHL, although his team won the QMJHL. He didn't really take that much of a step going forward. So I don't really rate him that high of a prospect. So as a result, both teams get a B. They're both kind of happy with how this goes. Hopefully Ethan Gauthier can kind of turn it around. Next up, one that I took a kind of heavy stance on, the Tyler Toffoli for Sharon Govich in a 2023 third-round pick. When I probably said initially like Devils A+, Flames, maybe even like an F. It's kind of flipped in a way for the Devils. I'm going to go with a B still. When looking at Toffoli, he was still as good as advertised. And similarly to Carlson, he was as good as advertised. He had 26 goals, 18 assists, 44 points in 61 games for the New Jersey Devils. It was kind of just everything else around him fell apart. And they still were able to at least flip him for a second and a third round pick. So they basically traded Sharon Govich for like a second round pick, which again, Sharon Govich was very good this season, which is why I give this now for the Calgary Flames. I give it an A. Sharon Govich was very good for them this year, 31 goals, 28 assists for 59 points. The underlying numbers don't really suggest that he's going to be a consistent 30 and 30 guy, but he can be 20 and 20, 25 and 25 going forward. He's still only 26 years old. Not a core piece for the Calgary Flames in 5-6 years, but definitely can be a solid player. And Suniev, who they used the third round pick on at 80th overall, had a very solid freshman season at UMass this year with 25 points in 36 games. So they got a decent prospect on top of a 26-year-old that just really broke out this season. Very good job by Craig Conroy. And I'll put my hand up. I was dead wrong on this. I'll freaking tar and feather me, Calgary Flames fans. I absolutely shat on your team when it turned out I was kind of wrong. Next up, one that I hated in the moment and did full-on stink and is just one of the worst deals of recent memory. Pierre-Luc Dubois for Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 second-round pick. That was Montreal's second-round pick. For the Kings, this is like an F, F-, a Z. When looking at it, PLD flopped in Los Angeles after signing that 8-year, $8.5 million deal. He had 40 points in his first season, and then he got dumped 1-for-1 for a 34-year-old Darcy Kemper, who was coming off a season where he had an .890 save percentage and still has 3 years left at 5.25, one of the worst goalie contracts in the NHL. So this was an utter disaster for the LA Kings. And when looking at the Winnipeg Jets side of this, I'm going to give him an A+, considering the fact that Gabe Vilardi is much cheaper than PLD, although he did deal with some injuries this year. He had 22 goals, 14 assists, 36 points in 47 games. He can be a legit 30 and 30 guy if he's healthy next season. On top of Iafallo, solid bottom sixer for the most part. Rasmus Kupari really isn't anything special, but that 2024 second round pick from Montreal that was 37th overall, they picked one of my favorite prospects in the 2024 draft, in Alphonse Frey. He was my 19th overall prospect, Swedish defenseman. They got him at 39th. So even like alone, like PLD for Vilardi, given the relative cap hits, that's arguably like an F and an A+. But when you add on top some of the pieces that they got as well, it was brilliant by Kevin Cheveldayoff in terms of getting that much of a package for Pierre-Luc Dubois. So A+, F for that one. Kevin Hayes got traded for a 6th round pick. Kevin Hayes half retained at $3.57 million. The Flyers, I'm giving them a B+ on this deal. Just got off his contract, and clearly he fell off this season because the Blues get a straight up F for this at $3.5 million. He wasn't even close to being worth that, considering he's an all offense guy. He had 29 points in 79 games, and then they had to attach a second round pick, a 2025 second round pick, to send him to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So yeah, they traded a 6th round pick to get him. Then they ended up just giving up a second round pick just to get him off his team. Absolutely brutal for the St. Louis Blues. For the Philadelphia Flyers, it was good to get ahead of that and at least get off half of his contract. Alex Newhook for the 31st and 37th overall pick. Colorado Avalanche, I'm going to give a B+ for this. Newhook really never popped with Colorado, and considering their top 6 was kind of locked up, to get a late first and an early second round pick for him was very, very good work. And for the Montreal Canadiens, I'm going to go with a B. I'm not going to kill him on this. I think it was a little bit of a steep price. And Newhook was solid this year. He had 33 points in 54 games, and I think he can be a solid 50 to 60 point guy going forward, second liner. But again, that was a decently heavy price. And also with Colorado, why they get a B+, they eventually went on to flip that 37th overall pick for Ross Colton. And I think Newhook is a little bit better. But again, the fact that they were able to basically trade away Alex Newhook for the 31st overall pick in Ross Colton, very good work. Versus the Canadiens, it's fine. They don't need any more. I understand the logic of this, considering the fact that they didn't need even more picks and prospects. They're kind of set in that regard. But I thought maybe for a package of the 31st and 37th overall pick, you probably could have got a better player. Maybe not a player as young that kind of fits their core better, but still, I think that was a little bit steep for a guy like Alex Newhook that I maybe don't think has this high ceiling. I know the Montreal Canadiens don't really need him to be a superstar first-line center, but still, very high price, and as a result, still a B+ and a B to the teams respectively. Sean Durzi got traded to the Arizona Coyotes for a second-round pick, and I got to go with an A for the Arizona Coyotes on this one, considering the fact Sean Durzi is not some superstar, legit number 1 center. He's never going to be that. But after a season where he had 41 points in 76 games, he's a legit top pairing offensive defenseman on a non-playoff team. It can probably hopefully be a very good second pair guy once the Utah Hockey Club is eventually competing at a high level. Yeah, 41 points, 76 games this season, 22, 43 a night. So to get that for only a second round pick, very good by Bill Armstrong when looking at it from the LA Kings perspective. It's interesting considering the fact I understand why they wanted to move off Durzi, considering they had Spence and Clark on that right side coming up. It hurts because in the 2023-2024 season, Durzi was only making $1.7 million. They definitely could have used him this season. And the second round pick it was a solid price to get back for a guy like Sean Durzi. The only problem is it is a second round pick that was used in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. So that kind of sours it a little bit. I'm going to go with the C+ for the LA Kings just because Sean Durzi was such a good player this season for Arizona, on top of the fact that this gave them the ammunition in their minds to go out and get PLD. Next up, we got the Ryan Johansson trade where he was traded from Nashville to Colorado, half retained for, funny enough, the signing rights of Alex Galchenyuk. When looking at Johansson, I got to give this a legit an F for the Colorado Avalanche. They thought maybe they could bring him back. He could be their second line center. It did not work out. 23 points in 63 games. Then he was dumped as part of the Sean Walker deal. Colorado kind of had to give up a first-round pick because they attached Ryan Johansson. It was also like a cap dump deal. Sean Walker probably was only going to get like a second and a third from a team, but considering they attached his one more year at $4 million, that's why. And for the Predators, they get an A. They got $4 million off the books and for basically nothing. And yeah, Ryan Johansson was a legit $2 million player this season. So good on Barry Trotz in terms of getting him out for nothing, although again, they did retain half. Damon Severson for a third-round pick. It was Damon Severson's UFA rights for a third-round pick. For the Devils, they got a third-round pick for a guy that they didn't even plan on resigning, and they eventually actually traded that third-round pick for the in the Sharon Govich-Toffoli deal. And for the Columbus Blue Jackets, it gets a C. I think Severson is a good offensive defenseman, although he didn't really produce like that this year, only 28 points in 67 games. The contract itself is not good. He's making $6.25 million the next 7 seasons, but it was only a third-round pick, and if you're Columbus, you probably can't attract too many free agents, so they were aggressive. I think Severson will turn it around, but still, Columbus is kind of directionless at this point. And then lastly, we have another Columbus Blue Jackets trade. It's a pretty damn big one. It was when Provorov was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets. For the Jackets, I'm going to go with the C+ on this. Provorov actually was pretty solid for them this season, but considering they gave up a first and a second-round pick to get him, yes, at 30% retained, but again, Columbus being that aggressive in the 2023-2024 season clearly backfired. He is like an okay second-pair guy, and they gave up a very, very hefty price in order to get him. For the LA Kings, I'm going to go with the C+. Yes, they did only trade a second-round pick in order to kind of move off the Cal Peterson contract, but they also did trade Sean Walker. And again, we talked about it before with Dursey, kind of how Sean Walker wasn't a part of their long-term plans on the right side, but still would have been nice to have him this year on the LA Kings. So I don't really love the deal for them. But the Philadelphia Flyers knocked it out of the goddamn park. They get an easy A+, considering they got a first, 2 seconds. One of them is Columbus' second. That is in 2025. That's probably going to be a top 40 pick on top of that first from LA that was from Columbus from the Gavrikov trade, if you want to talk about dumping into the trade trees. But when looking at it, they used that selection to take Oliver Bonk. They got Sean Walker, who eventually they got a first-round pick for Colorado. Cal Peterson is whatever. They have the salary cap space. Probably not going to be playing a ton, but just overall great rebuilding general managering by Danny Briere. It's a damn shame that Cutter Gauthier wanted out because they were just trending so fantastically. But this deal was great for the Philadelphia Flyers. They get an A+, the other two, a C+, and a C-. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think about all these trades? Should I do this for 2022? Should I do this for 2021? Let me know in the comments. I'll be seeing the next one.